You know it's bad if I'm the one telling you about an obscure anime, but whenever I bring this one up, no one seems to know what I'm talking about. Kind of crazy given that it revolves around one of the most key elements of magical girl and magical shows. Whether it's giving a heroine her powers, explaining complicated lore to give her actions purpose, or just being a silly little guy. Fairies are an important, though not always required, ingredient to the glue that keeps these magical genres together. And though they're usually supporting characters, that's not to say that these mythical creatures haven't had dedicated series of their own. But what happens when a series sets itself up as a magical girl show, but rather than focusing on a girl prepped to change the world, chooses to revolve around the tiny and ever so silly world of the fairies instead? You get a lot of us have that one niche dead anime series, and for me, that series might be Mirmo de Pon. By default. This series is so niche that everything I've learned about it has always been of my own volition because I genuinely have never seen anyone mention it in passing on the internet. Algorithms be damned. In fact, the only reason I know of this show's existence is because of a cruise vacation that I went on with my family in the mid-2000s. The ship was heading to Mexico, and so the TVs had Cartoon Network in Spanish. My sister and I watched the channel regardless, and a little show called Mirmo Zibang came on, with a theme song so catchy, I'd never forget it. From then on, despite having no idea what it was about because of the language barrier, I'd always keep this series and its goofy-looking, big-headed characters in the back of my mind. 9-year-old me naively believed that it would air in America eventually, but this never came to fruition, and Mirmo remained a Latin American, French, and Italian import for those who were lucky enough to witness it outside of Asia. It remains popular and nostalgic for people in Japan, but with only a few European and Japanese DVD releases, and many episodes left untranslated, this series' traction and conversation internationally has all but died. But I don't think this should be the case because from the episodes that I was able to find on the internet, I can honestly call Mirmo a comfort show of mine now. Having no idea what I was getting myself into before properly watching Mirmo for this video, I honestly expected to get bored of it. Instead, it charmed me and made me laugh and cry way more than I was ever expecting it to. Starting off as a manga written in 2001 by Hiromu Shinozuka, before airing as an anime from 2002 to 2005, it's definitely a product of its mid-2000s anime time and isn't without its various faults. But it's a fun, magical, episodic ride. And whether this is your first time hearing about it, or you caught several episodes when you were younger and didn't know how it ended, I'm gonna gush about it. Wagamama fairy Mirmo de Pon follows 8th grader Kaede Minami, who is in love with one of her classmates, but just can't muster up the courage to talk to him. But her life soon changes after she walks into a mysterious shop and purchases a very convincing mug. Once she pours hot chocolate into it and makes a wish as suggested by the spell on the bottom, a fairy named Mirmo pops out of it. This introduction is so similar to your typical magical girl anime that's what you'd assume would happen next. Like chop chop, give her her compact and let's get to transforming. Where are the monsters at? But no, Kaede is a normal teenage girl. For now. The only magical being here is the little chocolate-obsessed guy that came from the mug. Mirmo is a muglox, which turns out to be an entire society of fairies, many of whom continuously visit the human world due to their connections with Mirmo, whether they be his sworn rivals, his classmates, or his fated bride-to-be. They're so entertaining and really the stars of the show. Kaede's antics with these fairies may bring her closer to her crush, but things are never as simple as that. With a new rival of her own, new responsibilities, and tons of magical antics that quite literally change her life as she knows it. I had such a fun time watching this show. Well, that which was available on the internet. My time spent scouring the web for English subtitles and translations of this series made me feel a type of helplessness I hadn't experienced since the Middle Ages of anime media consumption. aka 2008. With 46 out of 52 episodes of the first season subbed, season 2 only available via English dub, a wholly untranslated season 3, and only a handful of episodes of season 4 containing subtitles, one of which is split up into 7 parts on YouTube, it's safe to say I time traveled to the mid-2000s trying to watch this anime. Life would have been so much easier if it were on streaming, but even then I'm sure it would be region locked to hell, leaving me with no way of watching it. Actually, it would have been no problem using NordVPN, this video's sponsor. Have you ever experienced being right in the middle of an anime series, only for the streaming service you're watching it on to totally scrub its interface of the show as if it were never on there in the first place? I have. Multiple times within a 1-month period. I love the streaming era. With NordVPN, I've been able to set my location to Taiwan, a region that has Cardcaptor Sakura on Netflix, and continue my rewatch of the show with subtitles and an interface that I just prefer. Better yet, if I'm traveling to the UK, I can still watch Healing Good Precure on Crunchyroll as if I'm at home, because NordVPN allows me to secure my connection so that it's like I'm surfing the web from my living room, even if I'm abroad. And Crunchyroll UK doesn't have the past 4 years of Precure seasons for some odd reason. And this comes with the perk of knowing my information is safe from data phishing, malware, and web trackers with Threat Protection Pro activated. And listen, these features that NordVPN offers are so essential at a time when anime accessibility is growing, yet legal access to our classic Maho Shoujo is becoming more restricted at the same time.
Right now, you can get a huge discount on your purchase of a 2-year plan, plus an additional 4 months, risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee.
All you need to do is use my link on the screen and in the description to sign up. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Maybe now I can finish Revolutionary Girl Utena. While I feel qualified to give comprehensive season-by-season thoughts, Mirmo is a very episodic series, with lots of one-time scenarios featuring many side characters. There are often callbacks to certain characters or episodes, but it's never really consequential to the overall story. In fact, rather than the story, the thing that would keep you coming back to this show was the characters and their colorful personalities. And boy, were its 8 core characters colorful. It's called Mirmo de Pon, but this show would be nothing without its equally important Kaede. Kaede doesn't have many big dreams or notable talents. She's not really the best in school either, and when it comes down to it, she lives her life in the passenger seat, watching opportunities go by. What a way to introduce a character. This is highlighted in episode 1 where she can't even muster up the courage to greet the boy that she's been watching from afar for over a year. We immediately get introduced to her in a way that would summarize her as average. Normal. So naturally, when the opportunity for her to overcome this box that she feels trapped in falls into her lap, she takes it. Her only wish on the mug is used in the hope that her classmate Yuki returns her love. Now, when I first saw this, I didn't know how to feel. So much of her character seemed to be wanting the attention of this boy who didn't even seem like a very riveting character in the beginning anyway. It was hard to watch. I was like, girl, get up. But before the first episode even ends, Kaede learns that she can't and shouldn't rely on magic to fix her social inabilities. She forces herself into her first awkward interaction with Yuki, no magic needed. Mirmo helps with his powers when necessary, but even so, this is not the Fairly Odd Parents. Mirmo isn't there to grant Kaede's every wish. In fact, Kaede's original wish, which summoned Mirmo, isn't mentioned again until the very last few episodes. And yet, I would still say that her relationship with magic is what brings her out of her shell and makes her a more proactive person over the course of the series. You are who you surround yourself with, and the Muglox fairies are so vastly colorful, funny, and different in their own ways that they bring out the inner self of every human they encounter. I want to introduce you guys to my best friends. Standing at about 3 inches tall, weight varying depending on how many sweets they digested that day. The fairies are without a doubt the best part of the show. I have to be honest, I wasn't too taken by their designs at first, and some of the animation shots earlier in the series made them look a bit odd rather than cute to me, but the more I watched, the more I became a bit obsessed with them. Mirmo comes from the land of Muglox, where fairies reside and live among their own society of businesses, schools, and their own monarchical system. And it just so happens that Mirmo is the prince of the Muglox kingdom. Not that that makes any difference to him. Mirmo isn't careless, but upon first meeting him, it's clear that he has selfish tendencies as well as a little obsession with chocolate. Even though he doesn't like taking orders and prefers to act of his own volition, Mirmo can't help but care for the people around him, no matter how much they get on his nerves or vice versa. When Kaede's heart of love is stolen by her rival in episode 6, and she loses her love for Yuki, Mirmo acts very passive about the situation at first. But seeing Kaede acting unlike her true self bothers him enough to try and right the situation at hand. I wouldn't dare call Mirmo a tsundere, because he's not one, but Mirmo's adventures with Kaede change and shape his resolve and relationships just as much as they do hers. I loved episodes that really showed off the friendship between the two of them, like episode 85, where Kaede has to find the real Mirmo amongst hundreds of fakes, or the finale episodes 171 and 172. Yes, there are that many. When Kaede outright refuses to follow through with Yuki's possible confession to her if it means she won't be able to see Mirmo again. Phase before bays, man. On a surface level, Mirmo de Pon is most likely classified as a shoujo romance, especially where the manga's concerned. But the heart of the series lies within the relationships between the fairies and the humans. And boy, are they different across the board. Mirmo wouldn't have ended up in the human world in the first place if he weren't running away from a certain arranged marriage with probably my favorite fairy of the bunch. Rirumu is the embodiment of girl fail. She's not very good at magic, and she's especially not very good at cooking, but she has a heart made of gold, and it especially burns for Mirmo. But even so, she is absolutely never afraid to tell him or anyone else off if they are in the wrong. Though maybe overdone at times, I still love this part of her personality. The best Rirumu episodes are the one that underline just how much she wears her heart on her sleeve, like episode 29 when Rirumu feverishly prepares lunch for her and Mirmo's anniversary, even though he forgets about it. Man. Or when other fairy girls like Poppy and Yamane have troubles with love, and she's the first to sympathize with them and offer help. It doesn't matter if it's for her sake or for the happiness of someone else. She cares so deeply, and I love her for that. But the Muglox fairies are a dynamic people. Each have unique ways of getting on Mirmo's nerves. Yashichi is a prime example of just that. As Mirmo's destined rival, he's a ninja fairy who tends to team up with the quote-unquote evil doers of the Muglox world to ruin Mirmo's life, which in other words is just bothering Mirmo until he gets frustrated. He's sort of like the Sasuke to Mirmo's Naruto. Yeah, I'm sticking with that analogy. One thing I didn't like about Yashichi's character was the sort of perverted personality they gave him, being obsessed with women's underwear patterns. Yeah, I hated this. Seeing Yashichi on screen was always a bit of a mixed bag of, will this be a normal scene or will I be jump scared by the panties thing? I feel like I've seen this trope elsewhere in other 2000s era anime, but that didn't make it any less facepalm inducing in this children's show. In any case, aside from that, Yashichi and his ninja fairy henchmen were very entertaining to watch, especially considering that the moments where he chose to help Mirmo may have outweighed the times when he decided to make his life more difficult, because no one can defeat Mirmo before Yashichi gets to, of course. Are you seeing the vision now? The funniest member of the Get on Mirmo's Nerves crew has to be his little brother, Murumo. Cosplaying as a sweet little bundle of joy, he acts as the cutest thing ever, just long enough to get what he wants, which is usually just marshmallows. Mirmo can see through his ways, but can't seem to convince anyone else that his brother is a menace. Murumo still loves his brother though, the proof being in the fact that the only reason he came to visit the human world in the first place was because he missed Mirmo at home. And just like Mirmo, all three of these fairies find their own human partners and extend their stay in the human world. But with varying personalities, living conditions, and overall temperaments, not one of these human fairy partnerships are like.
Hey Imani, you called this a shoujo romance anime earlier, so when are you going to stop beating around the bush and start talking about the love interest?
I mean, if I must. The other human characters of Mirmo de Pon are really of just as much importance as Kaede is throughout the series. I would go as far as to say that this is more of an ensemble show rather than one focused on a girl and her story. And the most noteworthy human after Kaede has got to be none other than Yuki. The main apple of Kaede's eye from the very first episode, and the subject of countless "the boy is mine" quarrels, we're introduced to Yuki in a way that would make one assume that not only is he highly sought after for a reason, but that he is, dare I say, at the very least, interesting. I hate to start off a character introduction so negatively, but I fear that the only thing worse than a character that is narratively written to be hated is one that is presented as this peak of the mountaintop, yet doesn't give you much to latch on to. And Yuki is by no means a bad guy. He's level-headed, quiet, kind. He has a sweet and respectable relationship with his fairy partner, Rirumu. He enjoys reading. Early on, we learn that he has aspirations to be an author. Over the course of the next 100 episodes, this tidbit of information would come up approximately one more time. But the story didn't really display any real reason for the two female leads to be fighting so feverishly over him, aside from the fact that he was a brunette boy. By far the most frustrating thing about watching Yuki's character from the 2¼ seasons I was able to view was how passive he was when it came to these girls' feelings for him. He never denied either girl's advances, which became a real problem for me once he started to acknowledge his budding feelings for Kaede in season 2. I mean, how many times does Kaede have to openly confess to you her feelings for you, which you share, before you turn down the flirting attempts and advances of another girl whom you have no interest in? The answer is at least 3 more times, apparently, and another 2 seasons, while still never openly rejecting the other girl. Man, his passive, unassertive, and sometimes hypocritical nature when it came to Kaede being preyed on by a clone of a teacher, yes, that is just as bad as it sounds, made it hard for me to fully enjoy Yuki's character. But I don't hate him. But listen, all this talk about the other girl is really doing a disservice to the character known as Azumi. She's a new student who knows exactly what she wants and has every intention of getting it. And that just happens to be Yuki, for some reason. Her initial confident, cool demeanor takes a turn once she sees competition in Kaede, and the non-stop antics immediately ensue. It was kind of hard to watch the drop kicks and sucker punches she dealt to Kaede on a daily basis whenever she was spotted with Yuki, but once it was acknowledged as a running gag, I kind of assimilated to the violence. Brute force is not the only thing Azumi uses to try and separate the two, finding her own fairy partner in Yashichi and using him as a plan crafter, a spy, and all but a paid employee. The relationship between Azumi and Yashichi is where I found myself uncomfortable. While it's a common mean girl character trait to treat people terribly while having a sweetness deep inside, it was hard to watch episodes such as episode 33, Goodbye Azumi, paint their relationship as anything but abusive. Yashichi keeping a detailed journal of panty designs was disgusting, but Azumi forcing him to do her house chores and using threats of flushing him down the toilet every episode was equally unwarranted, but maybe in some awful way, that is what made them the perfect partners. Her relationship with Kaede was honestly somehow less cruel and actually rewarding during moments when they teamed up or were on the same page. I actually enjoyed their 90% sour, 10% sweet relationship. And if anything, Azumi does her job of being a meddling antagonist very well. You may be understanding why I delayed talking about the human characters of Mirmo de Pon, but I swear to you, it wasn't all bad. It was really their dynamics combined that made the show enjoyable to watch. And what's a love story without a second male lead that none of the female characters are interested in? Of course, Matsutake serves as the other male love interest, but actually not really. He develops a huge crush on Kaede, but never really stands a chance, and really comes to serve as a bit of comic relief despite his wealthy background. I mean, he will fall flat on his face, but come back with a swift recovery to keep his cool guy image intact, and I respect the grind. I genuinely enjoyed seeing his ridiculous side quest storylines play out on screen, despite them never having any real consequence to the story. In part, it has to be thanks to the performance of his Japanese voice voice actor Soichiro Hoshi. Once I got to season 2 and only had the English dub available to watch, I missed his screams so badly. Despite coming from a wealthy family, Matsutake proves to be a sweet and generous guy, which works out perfectly for his fairy partner Murumo, who can be fed all the marshmallows he desires. But his kindness and naivety does come at a detriment when Azumi repeatedly cons him into teaming up with her to get between Kaede and Yuki. Matsutake doesn't have the evil in his heart like Azumi does, but he would still like to be the one that Kaede returns her feelings to. He obviously doesn't get this by the end of the show, but he won't let that stop him from keeping up his boyish charm and go-getter attitude. I have no notes. He was fantastic to watch. Discussing the main characters alone, you can tell there were great highs and questionable lows throughout this series. Due to its episodic nature, it contained very sweet and emotional storylines, and storylines that missed the mark, because as magical and nostalgic as it felt watching Mirmo de Pon, it was a product of the early to mid 2000s. And as such, it had a couple of plots that I wouldn't have minded being completely erased from the series. So let's start with the bad ones. Aside from Azumi and Yashichi's rocky relationship, episode 22, Yashichi's first love, was also not fun to watch. Yashichi meets a cute fairy named Otome and immediately falls in love with her. She accepts his confession, they go on dates, things are all peachy. I had a bad feeling of what direction this was going in from the start, but I just hoped that my instincts were off. Unfortunately, they were not, as the characters learn that Otome is actually a boy, and there pretty much ends the episode, as well as Yashichi's infatuation. I know it's easy to say, oh, transphobia in an early 2000s piece of media. Fork found in kitchen. But it was just unfortunate, especially when Otome was such a sweet character and a cute match for Yashichi anyway. She makes a few more appearances throughout the series and it's pretty much the same gag repeated, minimizing her character to nothing more than this. It was stupid. I hated that. My third biggest and final gripe is one that I already mentioned in passing. Season 2 introduces a variety of new characters, including Sayori, a world-renowned flautist who somehow has the ability to see Muglock's fairies even though she doesn't have a fairy of her own, as well as her childhood music teacher who is now teaching classes at their middle school. Near the end, Sayori somewhat randomly develops a crush on this teacher, which is a normal case but is uncomfortable to watch in the context of Kaede and the fairies trying to set her up with this teacher. The blushy fall into his arms moments were just too much. Like, what is going on? But I watched on in horror when the teacher finally confronted Kaede about her matchmaker actions.
What was the meaning of that?
Oh.
Weren't you intentionally trying to get Sori and I together? Well, this bothers me very much. Sori and I have a teacher-student relationship.
Thank you. Oh my god.
At least someone has some sense here.
I'm very shocked because it's actually you, Kaede, that I love.
Wait a minute, we're talking about Sorry now. Sorry.
What is going on?
Sorry.
This can't be real. And what is with these soap opera ass shots? Oh my god. Come on. This is ridiculous. I had never been as distressed as I was watching this. I was begging, pleading that there was a punchline to end this madness I was watching. Luckily, there was, and I'd never been so happy at the reveal of a brainwashing clone plotline, but I had to sit through what felt like car engine fluid being poured directly into my eyes to get there. I think what made this minor plotline worse was that there was no sense of condemnation, there weren't any other adult characters there to denounce the teacher, and the students were gossiping, acknowledging the weirdness, but they weren't old enough to understand that this was predatory behavior. It made this part such a frustrating and difficult watch that ultimately the story never needed. A random ass stain on an otherwise enjoyable series. But aren't you glad it was a brainwashing plotline for once? It was by no means perfect, but Mirmo and its characters somehow still managed to capture my heart. And though also a romance, it was clear that any storyline centered around the magic and the fairies was where Mirmo de Pon shined. One of the best examples of this being episodes 16 and 17, when Mirmo needs a greater magic power to defeat the Watermo gang, a group of moderately nefarious ninja fairies who have taken over the human world with their mild inconveniences. Yes, I am not exaggerating. Kaede visits the Muglock's world for the first time, earns herself a fairy form, and retrieves a magical mic that helps her power up Mirmo's magic spells for the next 35 episodes to come. And later on, Kaede cements her fairy status by getting a mug of her own so she can transform as she pleases, which leads to her attending fairy classes at the Muglock school. Though this show isn't often characterized as a magical girl show, this really made it feel like it was at least somewhere in the same whimsical realm. I was pretty disappointed when Kaede's very vital role in the magic in season 1 turned into her just using a cell phone communicator to contact Mirmo when she needed in season 2. I guess it is what it is when you're watching a children's show with the underlying intention of selling toys. The finale episodes of season 2 were equally bright spots, upping the ante with an actually threatening villain, Darku, and finishing with a light will prevail but darkness will always exist message akin to a Precure finale. I enjoyed it so much that I actually found myself disappointed that season 3 was left untranslated because I wanted the extra 48 episodes of content. I was only able to watch the 6.5 translated episodes of season 4, but I at least caught the vibe of this shorter season, wherein Mirmo really becomes a full-on love drama as a way to tie a bow on the series. And I think this was a good move. After covering so many silly fairy antics in the 150 episodes prior, it was really time to hone in on the relationship between Kaede and Yuki that had only been sprinkled across the 3 seasons. None of those fairy antics happened in vain though, because I cried like no other at the end when Mirmo has to leave Kaede due to her wish being fulfilled. He ends up coming back, with a new Muglock's world, human world relationship rule being established. But this has to be the best part about watching episodic, lighthearted shows like Mirmo de Pon. You laugh so much watching these characters do every activity under the sun that before you know it, they've become part of your daily routine, and suddenly you're attached. I had no idea how much I'd enjoy the various supporting characters, the humor, the music. Oh, the music! The music! I miss watching it already, and now I'm even more jealous that we were never blessed by this show's appearance on American airwaves. At 8 years old, I could have spent valuable time pouring chocolate milk into a mug and making wishes, and thanks to the obstruction of localization, I'll never get that time back. I felt like I one day had to watch this show that was so lost to my childhood, and I can thankfully report that I don't regret it. Mirmo's heart was in its magic, its silliness, and its relationships, and that couldn't align more with what I'm craving at the moment. Mirmo de Pon may have ended its anime and manga serialization in 2005, but a new creation by the original creator Shinozuka was just released in Chow magazine on May 6th of this year. Mirmo de Pon one more time. It's just the first chapter, but it features a now college-aged Kaede meeting Mirmo again, and it's so sweet to see the two of them together, knowing how much they solidified their relationship in the original series. There's a little hint at how Kaede and Yuki's relationship is going, but it doesn't give much away. Though I know there is no hope of this being translated in English, it makes me happy that there's a slight revival of Mirmo and a fan base in Japan that's excited to support. Despite having a weaker international presence, it's a classic magical kids show, and it's clear to me that America really missed out on this. Whether this is one of your childhood favorites, you'd only heard of it, or this is your first time hearing it exists, feel free to share your experience and thoughts on Mirmo de Pon. I know many of you are from countries where it did air, and you are so lucky. I have more things planned for the fall, including the possibility of a Patreon very soon, but I still have to work out the logistics.
When I'm not on YouTube, you can find me on my Instagram at Doreimani.
In any case, until then, I'll see you in my dreams. Bye, friend. Oh my god, his eyebrows! I didn't even see that!
eyebrows. That's so silly. That's hilarious.